July 20th Park Trails and Lakes Commission. Jamie, do you want to do roll call?
Chair Steenblock.
Here.
All right. Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Commissioner Moorhead.
Here.
Commissioner Ramseth.
Here.
Commissioner Steenblock.
Here.
Commissioner Gary. Commissioner Geyer.
All right, before we vote on the agenda, I'd like to make an amendment to the agenda. I know we have the downtown plan approval on here, so I would like to move that from 5G up to 5A, since we've got guests here, so that we can focus on that one first. And with that, I would be looking for a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting.
I move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second. So we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and abstain. All right, motion carries. And Jamie, I do see people here for the open forum. Thank you. Oh. Okay, Melissa Murphy, Kristen, is it Saltzman? And is it Renee Smith? Rainey Smith, okay. Do you guys want to come up to the podium? Welcome.
Thank you. Is this good to go?
Yep.
Okay. We do have a video to show, and it's kind of a highlight reel from the volleyball club, sand volleyball club that our girls are all a part of, and it ties in with what we're here to talk about today. So we can either watch it at the beginning or at the end.
You want to kick off with a little video clip and then go
Sure.
into your information?
Yep.
Okay. Not too bad.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we are here to talk about bringing some quality sand volleyball courts to Forest Lake. And I have been bringing my daughters to Lakeville and Rockford for the past 3 summers. This is our 3rd summer in order to participate in this beach volleyball club. And once we found out about it, we were hooked. And even though at the time we could handle the drive because it was COVID and we were working from home and there wasn't any traffic, it's gotten to be quite the long haul each time we go. It's over an hour drive, it's an hour and a half of practice, and then an hour or so home. But we do it because we love it, and as we started to hear about the plans for Forest Lake and that there's a grant from the state, and Belts Park, it sounded like, was gonna get worked on, and the city park downtown, we thought it would be a great opportunity to bring the idea to this group, because our club director for the TMP Beach Club has shown interest in expanding his number of players to come up to a northern suburb, and you know, we've got 3 of mine, 2 of theirs, and there's a couple others in the area, but we feel like with the volleyball, you know, just how important it is to the city of Forest Lake and the surrounding community, that they could really benefit from having access to quality sand beach volleyball and be able to bring that to the girls here. So you all, I think, have a printout of what we put together here. I'll just kind of quickly run through it. TMP, the McCarthy Project, is the name of the club that we all belong to. As you can see, he's very committed to competitive beach at local and national level. He does have girls or players that have gotten scholarships to play beach volleyball in college, and he's constantly getting emails and being contacted by universities throughout the country looking for players. So he's definitely on the radar, and he's growing, and he just wants these girls to be successful as well. So it's 2-on-2, as you saw in the video. The summer season is from mid-April to mid-August, and then he does do an extended fall season from mid-August through mid-October. So it's a good 6 months, depending on the weather, of playing time in the sand. He does training and practices, and then also he hosts a number of tournaments. So this year there were 14 tournaments that he hosted between the Lakeville and Rockford courts, and then he did a couple extended cities as well. The ages of the players are from 10 to 18, so there's 4 different divisions. And then you can see that over the past few years, he's really grown from 23 players, 5 years ago to over 100 now. And all of that has been word of mouth. A lot of these girls play indoor club volleyball, and once they started telling their friends about it and how much it's improved their indoor game, then more started coming, and he's just really, it's all been through word of mouth. Let's see, we have traveled to multiple tournaments around the country, this year Wisconsin, Florida, and California. But like I said, the 2 main sites right now that he does the practices at are in Lakeville and Rockford. The kind of what we did our research on was with Lakeville, because they have 4 courts, a huge park where the community, when we're there for practices, the whole park is being used. The volleyball courts are nicer courts where they have decent sand. Girls aren't getting cut up or not wanting to dive in the sand because it's good quality sand. And actually, when I called them to get some input on how much it would cost to do something similar here, they told me that they're completely renovating that entire park, and they're going to upgrade the volleyball courts to even better sand and better poles, and it's been such a popular thing in the community that they are wanting to make it even better. They're renovating the entire park, but the volleyball courts are part of that plan. So I don't have any cost estimates. He told me to contact him in a few months once he has those. But it's it feels like something like what they're doing in Lakeville is what we could do up here in Forest Lake. And we have, between us, we know that there's quite a few players in the area who were wanting to do it this year, but just couldn't commit because of the drive. So I think we could easily get 40 players from this community going to these practices and using the courts pretty regularly. And the other thing is having that many courts would allow him to do tournaments up here. So we could host tournaments. These tournaments are part of a national events program that he's in, and so they do get points in the system, and then they get qualifications and bids to play in the nationals tournaments, which are in Florida and California. So it does get out there for the colleges and universities to be recruiting them. And then also, like I said, it benefits their indoor games. So with the Lakes volleyball program here, the timing works out well because that ends at the end of April, and they could go right into the summer program with the beach. What else do we have? So what we need is the 3 to 5 courts in order to host tournaments. The quality sand is a high priority. We've played at the Belts Park, just for fun, and the girls definitely are saying, that we need to have better sand in order to play competitively. A restroom or porta potty access is also pretty important. A water source. A lot of times the places that we play at are near a lake or a river, and that actually does keep the sand cooler. But even, having access to be able to spray down the courts if we need to, something like that would be beneficial. But they do have sand socks that they wear to keep from burning their feet if the sand does get too hot. And honestly, that, is something we would like to have, but isn't super important, I guess. And then parking as well. So I think having, especially when we do the tournaments and that many people are coming and there's spectators and things like that, parking could be an issue if it's just on the city streets. The screenshots that we put in are, basically just going out to Google Maps and taking screenshots, and then I took the courts from Belt Park and used that as kind of a determination for how much space would be needed. So I think we could fit 4 courts in any of these options that we put out there, but by no means is it like official or it's just suggestions and ways to show that we can fit 4 courts and maybe a parking lot if we needed. With that, I think I hit everything on probably went over time, but if there's questions or.
Thank you. So just so you know, we'll take the information that you gave us here tonight, and then we'll have conversations about it, and then we'll get back to you. And if we add it back to the agenda, obviously we would invite you back to that as well. But
Okay,
just so you know what the next steps, what you can expect next step-wise.
great.
I have one question.
Sure.
Are 4 courts a requirement, or? if
3
we-
would be the minimum in order to host tournaments. He can do them with 3, but it gets to be really long. Having 4 courts going really keeps things moving, and you're not out there in the hot for that long. But if it were 3, I think you could still host some tournaments. If it were less than 3, we would definitely use them for practices. He would come up here for practices, but we wouldn't be able to host tournaments.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great
Thank you for
presentation.
listening.
Lots of homework already done.
Yes. All right, so let's move to the new 5A, which is the downtown plan approval recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. If you give me just a second to pull up my. So in March of 2021, the city's Economic Development Authority engaged with a private planning firm and a local committee. It was a 15-member committee of residents, business owners, local government representatives to develop a new downtown plan. The downtown plan is a guiding document for where we wish the downtown to be in a extended horizon. I think when the planning process started, it was kind of thought to be 10-year, but I think really we're looking at a 20, maybe even plus year horizon for all of the improvements. The committee met one time monthly with 3 open houses, several other community presentations, including Arts in the Park, in which they solicited public feedback, I think including coming to this commission at least one time prior to now. The plan, and I think it hasn't been too long ago that you saw a draft of a draft final plan, identifies 11 plan directives that looks at different types of activities, redevelopment, wayfinding, programming, parking, all of the kind of things that we'd like to look at in our downtown, and that downtown boundary being second to second, centennial to the lake. Really looking at that highly concentrated area in which Lakeside Memorial Park is a part of. The plan implementation, as I noted, a 15 to 20 year highlight. Our timeline identifies catalyst projects, early phase projects, those happening within 5 years, later phase projects, 10 years, and opportunistic. Even though the plan does call for preliminary cost estimates at a total of $35 million for all of the projects, this plan's adoption doesn't include any sort of funding stream. This is just high-level costs of what we can anticipate when we look to do these projects. Right now, neither the EDA nor the council has dedicated funding to any element of this plan. So tonight, what I am here to do is to request any final comment before we bring this forward to the City Council for their formal consideration of adoption, as well as a formal recommendation from this commission. It's anticipated to be brought before the council. It will be brought before the council on Monday evening. It has been reviewed by the EDA, who's provided a favorable recommendation of approval, as well as the Planning Commission. And I'm happy to go through any of the programming elements for the commission. I know that you had some pretty good workshop time with city staff. I believe Mayor Bain was a part of that as well, and I think the city has really taken the feedback from this commission and tried to implement it. But we're here one last time to solicit any final feedback and recommendation. Does the commission have any questions for me or Mayor Mara? Do you want to say anything about the plan, I guess?
So thank you, and good to be with you again. Thanks for the feedback that you provided in our previous workshop session. I hope that you find your comments incorporated into the final draft, and really thank you for the work in getting us to this point. Maybe a couple of points to think about. The plan, it sets out a prioritization and a series of development features for the future of downtown, of which the city may be the leader in some of those plans, and the city may be a partner with another entity, or even a follower. We may be in the back pocket of somebody who's driving forward with the plan. Each of the individual features that are included in the plan would come forward to our, typical city's budgeting cycle, planning cycle, approval cycles, as we consider each individual element. And so know that we're not looking for approval on specific projects, but really we're looking for approval on the overall concept. And we take that overall concept then, as we get into the next layers of the plan, both on directives that the city might be leading, things like streetscape, things like parks and recreation, infrastructure, utilities, the things that only the city really does. But also as we are considering proposals from future developers, and the plan kind of helps to inform what the city might be looking for as those additional requests come in. And so that really drives the urgency now. We suspect and we know that there's always consideration of development in our downtown. And what we have today is a very piecemeal approach, in my opinion. And this really helps to provide some governing documents and some governing guidance on those future plans, and forces us to really think about, based on location, what are we really going to do with key things like infrastructure, parking, pedestrian facilities, so that we have an overall plan that works together, rather than what we have today, which is individual site-specific. We do okay at the individual site-specific level, but you end up with a patchwork solution, and I think that's really the hole that this is trying to fill. This does have a big price tag, and I want to just maybe provide some assurance that although there is a big price tag, again, each individual project has to come forward with an individual budget before it would move forward. So we're not blessing a budget tonight. We're not asking for that, but we're just trying to give some perspective to scale, to know that what is this ultimately going to cost, and I think that helps to keep us within the guide rails of what's reasonable. And also know that not all of those costs will ultimately be borne by the city. I expect we will find some grant funding. I expect we will find some partnership dollars with the state or the county. DNR, for example, might be another source. And then we will also find some, hopefully, some partnership funding with some private investors, as we look at some private-public partnerships, perhaps on things like parking. So it's considered to be an overall price tag, but again, just know that we're not expecting that is an immediate blessing of costs that would be borne directly by residents and business owners in Forest Lake today, but really, again, just to provide some concept to scale that help to kind of inform future decisions on what we might choose to prioritize and what might in the plan be city-led. Also specific as it relates to the park, and I think important to note for you, is a lot of pieces to this puzzle really hinge on the future of the boat launch. And in my opinion, the plan does a good job of just identifying that step one is to decide what is even feasible. We have a number of options based on feasibility, but the plan at this point does not have a solid conclusion. And I think the best thing we can do is to say we've identified it as an important linchpin to many other decisions, but there's some details we need to work out as a city and as a community, some priorities we need to make. That some of those are in our court, some of them are also with the DNR and some other partners that really will help to guide what is possible for other areas of the plan. And so I would expect that to be something that we would look to want to fund, probably as part of the 2023 budget cycle, because again, it really sets the stage for a lot of use of space of a lot of those kind of different activities that are all competing in a very tight cluster of space. So happy to answer any questions you might have. And ultimately, again, thanks for the work on getting us to this point.
I guess, so we kind of looking at it, and the parking structure that is close to Lakeside there, the long oval,
Yes.
I hate to see something like that there, because you're gonna be minimizing the lake. Is there any way that we can get that on the west side of the road and have some kind of a pedestrian,
Yeah. So the plan identifies 3 potential areas for parking. There is the kind of the oval that would be to the south, the southern portion of the park, and kind of adjacent to the park. There's been, we haven't gotten too far into design, but the concept would be something that had some level of underground capacity, at least perhaps like half a story, to at least be able to provide multiple layers of parking without having too much height. Again, there's a lot of design elements that are at this point are just conceptual. We know that the water table, for example, is challenging, and so, there are some kind of pros and cons of putting things in that place. As I've just heard consensus of opinion, that seems to be generally the least favorable option. There is some benefits to having parking adjacent. That's something that we hear. People want parking available and they want it near. That may make the north side of the park a more feasible option. However, my personal opinion, if we've gone that far, let's just cross the street and get all of that traffic over, and that really alleviates a whole host of challenges that we will have on just trying to get that volume of people and that volume of cars moving successfully in that corridor with a park right there. And the future of what may happen with a GONE project at the current Vanelli site, I think, is going to push this to a decision that we need to make sooner rather than later. And when that project develops, we will have to have an answer for what is that future planned parking, and that will help to guide, is that going to be something that is on the north side of the park, and then on north or south side of the park, and then is it east or west of 61? That's a really long answer to say. I'm not sure that there's a known solution. I also know that parking is incredibly expensive, and this may be an area where, depending on timing, we may be looking for a partner, and depending on timing of redevelopment, we're not, if we're dependent on a partner and we want to choose that path, then we kind of are independent on where that structure may go. And as much as we might want to have a preference, we might have a really great option to have something that is on the east side that maybe makes that something that we would consider. So the funding around that parking and then the timing of when that decision needs to be made, I think, are kind of 2 of the key drivers that are going to kind of guide us on which of those options is best. So tough to tell how those pieces are going to come together, but your feedback is very common, and as I've just kind of synthesized lots of feedback, it seems to be the lesser of the options. But sometimes the easiest thing is where it is today, and it is where it is today, so I appreciate for that reason that the planners did include it. But your feedback is again, I think shared by many. Parking and that recreational facility at the park, I think whatever we can do to create some distance is helpful, but also we're trying to thread the needle with people's expectations for distance to walk.
Yeah, just.
And
kinda-
crossing 61 too.
Crossing 61.
Yep.
But if that, just for example, if that oval, then we're gonna have to back all of the food trucks back up farther,
Correct,
and we're gonna,
Yep.
we're gonna just scrunch everything in there.
correct. Yes, agree.
If I might just add to, all of the elements in this plan are gonna undergo additional studies. So through those processes, we will bring that back to our commissions, Park Commission, Planning Commission, just to get your input, to have these dialogue on each individual specific project as they come forward.
Mayor Bain, the Lakeside Parkway just seems to be, it's right next to the park, people have to cross it
Right.
to get to the park, and it just seems that that's a children and people who are not very quick of foot to
Yeah.
get across there.
Yeah.
And, you know, it seems to me that the path for the future is less focus on car traffic. And this kind of puts car traffic right
does.
in my thinking where
It
it
does.
shouldn't be.
It does. I think this is the great compromise. That parkway is kind of the great compromise of trying to solve for multiple challenges. If parking were not able to be done on the west side, and if we were to have a sizable development to the south portion of the park, think like the Vanelli's site, and if we had to use parking to be on the northern portion of the park, we do need a way to get traffic safely, you know, for that to be a throughway. And today, we do have lots of pedestrian and vehicle traffic navigating that, and they're doing it today in a parking lot. And this was well, it's better than in a parking lot, but your concerns of, are we asking too much for that space, I think also is widely shared. But again, recognizing if one of our parking options is on that northern side, and if we do have significant development on the south, we will likely need some sort of a traffic circle there. When I say circle, meaning traffic being able to circulate on 61 as well as on that parkway, just to move the volume of users we may have. And again, that's where this was, well, if it's a problem, let's at least have a design feature that at least allows for that problem to be solved in a more safe, controlled environment than the parking lot free-for-all that we kind of have today. So it's trying to do many things, but for your concerns are good ones, and again, I think are shared.
Commissioner Ramseth, I'd also acknowledge that just because it's shown there, I think as we study the parking scenario, there are opportunities to move that closer to buildings, further away, because I think that there is it's a high-level design. I don't think the city is committed to that being directly along the park itself.
One of the options that's even been discussed is, rather than that being on the east side of the existing parking lot, could it be on the west side and closer to those buildings?
Where there is
Right,
road to.
where there is that traffic flow today. The juggernaut in that is the location of that small eastern park, you know, we've got that small roundabout. However, again, with the potential redevelopment that's coming to the south, and there is a lot of parking that is, you know, on that east side of that redevelopment, that's really kind of where we're going to have to put some immediate focus, and depending on how the application comes in and what's asked for that site, I think that's also gonna kind of help to determine how do we solve for that. What I like about the plan is it does give some options, and we're not too locked in on any one particular option, because certainly there are, you know, problematic features with several of them. You know, the crossing 60, and this is trying to weigh out different concerns, because crossing 61 and concerns about crossing 61 was a very common top, both in-person meetings as well as online feedback. So,
Is there any idea, or have we ever talked to the state, because Highway 61 is a state highway?
Correct.
and
Yep.
Are they amenable to changes?
Yeah, so I suspect yes. Also, 61 is under consideration of being turned back to the county, and so the county has had an opportunity to review the plan and provide some high-level feedback to the plan. So I think we do have a partner on, wherever that is. We currently do have a controlled crosswalk. And so whether we solve for that with an additional one or some upgrades to that facility, the plan has gone as far as to say, well, maybe we should build something above grade and have some, not necessarily a skyway, but some sort of a bridge facility that would take you from a second level parking ramp across the street. There's a hefty cost that comes with that. And again, I think that kind of the way outs and pros and cons is something that we're gonna have to take in a future stage, but we have had, I would say, some enthusiastic feedback and just some recognition of, yes, 61 is a core thoroughfare for the city, but we all want some, pretty significant safety enhancements. The other thing that helps on 61 is just the streetscape improvements. There's currently a turn lane in the middle of 61, and that was developed at a time when we had a lot more individual building or sites for vehicle turning traffic. Those sites no longer exist, and if we're looking at that as being more of a straight thoroughfare, taking out that turn lane and using that extra space to widen the sidewalks and to create a little additional buffer between pedestrians and that traffic just also helps to create a safer environment. It potentially could be traffic calming and help to just make people feel more safe in being able to cross 61. Today it feels very Frogger-like you're, so I think those design elements also make that just a little bit more pedestrian friendly, both for walking the sidewalk as well as crossing, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Karen? I just hear a lot, and I know it's high-level planning. You put a 35 million figure on that, and the community is just going, what? Because they don't understand
Of course.
the other.
Of course.
And then they say, much ado about nothing. A lot of money spent, a lot of time talking, but then they keep bringing up moving the boat launch, and they don't know where they're going to put the boat launch, so why even have something like that? And they keep talking about the Pat Gone development, like that's a done deal. And so the comments are to me, they're very pessimistic about this spending and the money that we did for the survey, or for the program, is going to do anything at all. And I don't know how we get around that. I don't know how I explain to the community when they ask me, why are they still looking to move the boat launch? They honestly admit they don't have a clue where, they don't have a clue how much. So why, they don't concentrate on one thing. They just give you a big picture of a lot of ideas, but they seem to be a vision forever. And then they hear the 35 million and they just go nuts because they think it's all just being spent. So I don't know how we do that, but parking, to me is number one issue for everybody. And some of these other ideas are hard for me to explain to folks. I know they've tried to have a lot of input, and they have had a fair amount. But the comment is, it's just, we spent a lot of money to get this far, and what can we really see, and what can we really talk to about the people that's going to be done? Last night at the Arts in the Park, one guy I was talking to, and he says, I'm not giving them any ideas or anything until they get rid of that theater building. It's hurtful for the man who bought the Fireside Getaway. I tried to explain to him it's something about 61, and why can't you just bulldoze that down until you get rid of some of that blight? Why are you even... So, people are thinking on more of an everyday level than a plan 5 to 20 years out there.
So I think that's the complication of having a master plan, is by definition, you have to be high level before we can get into the detail. Otherwise, we are, to take each one of those projects, it's challenging to answer it without an overall concept of what is it that we want from an overall goal. So I appreciate the frustration of, is it too high level and is the timeline too long? I appreciate that feedback. I think that what we've spent so far with the planner has been modest. And certainly, dollars that are, it's a costly project, but it does give us a tool that now we can use to guide future decisions, and it's a tool that has had a level of community feedback, and I feel much better going into future projects having had that level of community input, and that happened because we had a planner who had, you know, the ability to do a broad website and to, you know, collect electronic feedback and to facilitate the meetings, and so there's value in that that helps to inform those future decisions. And then it's a bit of an exercise in patience and sequencing, because those questions are good questions. We just don't have that level of definition yet. And if we wait to pass the plan until we have that level of definition on all of those elements, it's just not going to come together. And I think that there's some value in having the, you know, tiered approach, where we start at the top level and reach consensus on some broad objectives, so that then with that consensus, then we can use that to come back, and we will be using this plan as we consider future developments. And, you know, if that's the GONE project, or if that is a potential, the owner of the theater building wants to tear down that building and put something else in there, let's talk about that, and we can use that.
He definitely wants to. I think we've heard him a number of times, and he's out there
He has the ability to do that, so.
talking about the underground at under 61, that he can't move forward because that stymies him. I've never heard once that he could do it if he wanted to.
I mean, it has to meet some project specifications, and so I'm not fully sure of what the barriers are on those. But again, I think that having the plan helps to inform what is the city's role in those decisions, and ultimately, again, how do all of these pieces fit together? So I hear the comments that you bring up, and they are good comments, because they're, you know, it feels like, well, is there anything really here? And it's a plan to move forward for what's next, and the work doesn't stop here, and we don't start and I think the other pause point is, we don't start spending money yet. This helps to inform before we start doing that. And there's, you know, recognition that there's mixed feedback on the boat launch also kind of helps to, that's a good data point for us to know, and to know that, gosh, there's a lot of questions here, and we should really be thoughtful in considering what those options are before we were to make a decision. So,
If I could go back just one more minute to
Yeah.
Fireside Getaway, because I'm thinking of it in a whole new way. When he purchased that building, his idea was to tear it down right away. Certainly, it doesn't do his business any good to have it sitting there. And he was just stopped all the time from either the city, and then the city would say it's a state highway. And so he's been passed around, and I would really like to have some firm information on
I'm
what
not
we
sure.
can talk to about him.
So I'm not sure I have enough information on that specific project to be able to.
And would that have to wait until, I mean, it is part of a design, I get that, you know, that you're looking at a whole thing and now you're talking about one building, but hopefully he would never have to wait until the high-level ideas are talked about.
Individual property owners have an ability to redevelop their redevelop and go through that planning and zoning process. There's nothing around, there's no part of this plan that is putting a hold on any of those individual plans. So.
I would appreciate to have accurate information for me to give these folks, so when they bring this up, I don't say, you know,
Commissioner Moorhead, if I might, you're happy to give them my phone number and send them directly to the Community Development Office. We would happily work one-on-one with those property owners about the redevelopment of their
So
sites.
you've never talked with the property owner of Fireside Getaway?
I have not, no.
Wow, okay. I'll certainly have them.
Yep, I would say if there's questions you can't answer, always just feel free to direct them to staff. We're happy to help provide the information and the direction our property owners, our business owners need.
Okay.
I actually have some feedback as well, and I'll ask Jamie if you want me to send an email after the fact, I can. But my feedback is focused strictly on the park piece of this, and it's feedback that I would like council to consider as this moves forward. And then Commissioner Geyer also sent some feedback that I want to make sure I read too. So I'm not looking for any responses. I would just like to have this gathered and considered by council as it moves forward, just so you kind of know where my expectations are at right now. So just to give you a little feedback, I've watched all the meetings as this has moved forward. I've looked at the feedback that's been provided, and I've done some research historically, so that's where my feedback is coming from as it relates to this, is just holistically watching it. And again, it is only focused on the park piece of this because we are that commission. The first piece of feedback I'd like council to consider is just the boat launch change. There was a study, as you know, when we had our meeting, there was the study that was completed in 2004. And in looking at that study that was completed in 2004, I'm not sure why that couldn't be leveraged instead of paying for a new study. Studies tend to be typically quite expensive. So if there is a way to leverage that information, I think that would be great. I also question where it would go, where it would still give us some of that draw downtown and not have a significant price tag associated with it. So I'd really like the council to consider whether or not a new study needs to be done or the existing one could be leveraged. The study also, in looking at the contract with the DNR for that, it technically doesn't expire. I know we talk a lot about it expiring in 2025, but if you look at that, it does say that it can be renewed for a 5-year period and continue to automatically renew as the end of each 5-year period unless one of the parties gives a written notice. So I think
That's a good clarification.
I think that should be taken into consideration as well, that it technically doesn't expire. And I think in looking at the community feedback, there's been a lot around that boat launch that really needs to be considered. Mayor, you hit on this one just a little bit, the financial aspects of this strategy. Again, not looking at the whole picture, but just the park piece of this, it's got a pretty significant price tag as well. And I appreciate your feedback as in relation to it not necessarily being solely a city responsibility, but maybe some private-public partnerships there as well. But I want to make sure that selfishly, this does not take away from some of the other initiatives that we've had on the radar for many years for from a park standpoint and enhancement. So I think that needs to be considered. I did notice in the most recent draft of the report, there's language around the beach house that is reflective of kind of, we heard your feedback, fine, we'll leave it in. But if the beach house needs to be done down the road, then we'll consider removing it. That language is, in my mind, retrospective based on a plan that no longer exists. So it should, frankly, in my mind, be a removal of removing the beach house. Because in the final plan, if you're hearing the feedback from this commission, which was to leave the beach house there, there should be it should be silent. And it should be removed from the plan.
Point of clarification, would you still be open to, I think one of the reasons why it might be removed would be a bigger facility that's able to incorporate warming house or some other amenities. You're still open to future consideration of those other amenities? It just is more of a consider being perhaps more silent or more vague on what does that mean? Are we being too, I guess my question is, are you open to the additional amenities that are considered in the plan? And then obviously it would have to come back to, okay, what's the facility that's needed to provide for those amenities? Or are you suggesting?
I think it should be removed completely. The report talks about the removal of the beach house specifically. And then we get into that, are we renting from Gone or somewhere else?
Yeah, okay.
And what does that look like?
Okay.
In my walking down to that park and actually talking to people that were there, that having it where it's located is a key piece for them. And the argument in the report was that it was blocking the view of the lake. It has a very significantly small block of the lake view,
Fair point.
which is hard for me to digest. Just like anything else we would do in any of our parks, if there was a need for something in a park, it could be considered in front of this commission and worked into a long or short-term plan.
Perfect.
So I think
Perfect.
any reference to the beach house being removed should be removed.
Chair, can I ask one clarifying
yeah.
question, just to make sure that we send this message not only correctly to the council, but also our consultants who will amend this? I hear you would like it, right now it reads possible beach house relocation. Are you comfortable if we look at some language that just says assess beach house upgrades, improvements, alterations? You have something that's kind of still focusing on the fact that we may need to look at that structure and how it can be modified or changed or altered. I think specifically there's been question about the wild ice recreation arena, and if we add in wintertime events, whether or not the existing beach house is going to be sufficient for those other season needs. And I think if we're silent on something about this structure specifically, we could at least just miss that opportunity in a high-level plan that later down the road, someone says, well, no, we never said that. We do that in the downtown plan.
I think I would be open to looking at language and considering it at that point. We've given feedback, and it hasn't moved based on our feedback as we had talked about. So I'm a little hesitant to say, yes, I would be comfortable with that when
Sure.
when it's been demonstrated twice to us that the way it's been rewritten and redesigned hasn't aligned with our feedback. So to me, it's like any other capital improvement. If we decided we needed something, where would that be and what would that look like and how would that be incorporated into the long-term strategic plan? So it's a roundabout way of saying maybe.
Sure, understandable. I
Maybe.
just want to make sure that when we go to the council with final adoption, that we've got your best wishes and hopes and direction so that we're crafting that language that meets this commission's recommendation, but doesn't also, preclude us in the future. The idea
Nothing
being
should
highlight-
preclude us in the future
Right,
for
exactly.
any of our parks. I mean, that is part of our master planning is to, if there are ideas and concepts that need to come forward, nothing would be precluded. What I worry about a little bit is if to me, it's a slippery slope. So we put this in, do we need to put in that we want a new sound system to go with the wild ice recreation? I mean, there's so many things that could be added here that, like I said, nothing would be precluded. Is it a nice to have or a need to have when we have a facility right now that is structurally very sound and it is meeting the needs? It's not increasing expenses by having to potentially lease a building. It's not taking kids out of the sight line of parents. My preference would be that it remains silent at this point, but maybe.
We'll convey that.
Add
We will.
to yours, I would 100% agree with what you just said, because it can always be brought back in another fashion. But if we leave any language in there at all, that we were open to anything, it's a very slippery slope. And that is one thing that is not popular out on the street, moving that facility. And so,
We'll make sure that is conveyed in the public record and to the council.
In 2006, we did the park renovation. And part of the intent behind that was to increase traffic downtown. That was the goal behind that renovation. One of the goals was to increase traffic downtown. So I would just ask that as we pursue this option, that council really come forward or ask for a plan that matches this plan, that talks more about how we are going to get people downtown and how we are going to get businesses downtown, that balance to go along with it. Because it hasn't even been, if we think about it as a 20 or a 25-year plan, the last renovation that was supposed to drive traffic downtown hasn't even been in place for 20 years. And apparently it missed the mark, right? Because we have another plan that we're working on now. So I just think it's important to have, if we're gonna make these changes and we're relying on this park to drive this, what does that look like? and I asked this at the last meeting, what do we anticipate the increased traffic to be as a result of this plan? And what do we see as the increased dollar or revenue generation? And I know you don't have that yet, but I would ask that council consider having that plan to align with this before we move forward with anything. Because it's a significant amount of money when we don't know the other half of that equation. The traffic has already been brought up, but I will bring that up again, that I think the better option for traffic is on the west side. Again, we've talked about water tables. I do believe that with some of the underground parking that was originally in that area, I think there were some significant issues because of the water tables. So as we look at putting in permanent structures that will further potentially impede access and views and all that stuff along with the water table will make these investments significantly more expensive. So my recommendation is that parking be explored on the west side. The transient boat slips, just one thing to consider with that they are transient. And I would love a boat, but I don't have a place to park it. This could be an option for me, technically. So what I'm getting at with that is I think if we're gonna create more transient boat slips, we just need to make sure that there's a policy in place that aligns with that, and we take into consideration that you need somebody to monitor that, to make sure it doesn't become somebody's permanent boat slip for the season, because transiently I could put it on in April and take it off in October. So something to consider there, the additional costs associated with that. I also noticed in the last meeting, I think it was it both to EDA and planning, there was the reference to the feedback about the skate park, and we added in a skate park component of this. I think that is another opportunity for that to come back to this commission and not be included in the plan. Seems a little bit like a knee-jerk kind of reaction at the last minute. And we have a lot of other park area available to us where it may make more sense as you think about the small size of our footprint here. So I would like that removed and brought back here for consideration as to where that may go. And then lastly, there was a piece in the plan about incentives to get business owners to, for lack of a better term, clean their alleyways.
Yes.
We have enforcement that should be in place, and we shouldn't be incentivizing them to clean up their areas. We should be enforcing the policies that we have. So I think from a cost perspective, that might be an opportunity for us. And then Commissioner Geyer indicated that she doesn't believe we got the answers to some of the questions that we raised during our last meeting, and if approval is simply to move forward with discovery and that no park will be initiated without commissioner approval, then she is okay moving forward, but she does not want any action taken until it's brought back here.
That is true, and we will bring back any future development plans of any infrastructure that affects Lakeside Memorial Park, the addition of new parks or features in any of the parks to this commission.
Yep, I just wanted to make sure I got her message. And I did have one other comment on page, if you look at page, I think it was 31 of the report that you provided, there was comments about Lakeside Memorial in specific, and a lot of the things that are being recommended as being revamped here were not reflected in the community feedback. They actually seem to like, for the most part, how Lakeside Memorial was laid out. So as we talk about community feedback, it has to go both ways, right? We can't use community feedback as this is why we're changing this, and then not use it to say this is why we're not changing it. Our numbers were relatively small in comparison to the number of our community as a whole, but I think those are, using those numbers goes both ways. So those are the things, just a few things I would like council to consider from my perspective as it relates to the park side of this, as if it moves forward as a motion.
We appreciate your thoroughness.
Very well said.
Any other discussion, or do we have a motion?
I move we approve the development plan with the considerations put forward by the Parks Commission.
So we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second?
We have a motion and a second, any further discussion?
I'm afraid at this time, I have way too many questions yet that I don't have the answers for. And so at this time, I admire the whole process and the way it was done, but I'll just have to be a no on this one.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstain? All right, motion carries. Thank you.
Commissioners, I have an appointment I need to go to, but I appreciate your time tonight and appreciate all the feedback on this. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, where's my agenda? All right, so we have the Relay Park event permit application next on the agenda.
All right, Chair and members of the Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission, here before you on the agenda tonight is consideration of approval for a park event permit for the Ragnar Race for Cool and Camp Park. So I'll just walk through this here quick. Ragnar Race is a 200-mile team run that takes place over 2 days. It starts in Minneapolis and ends up in Duluth. And this year, this race will be coming through our area August 12th through 13th. And again, this year, Cool and Camp Park is one of the destinations here in Forest Lake that Ragnar Race would like to use our park for a transition period in this race as one of the handoff marker points. So as you can see in the staff memo that was provided, Ragnar Events is seeking to use primarily the parking lot at Cool and Camp Park, which is highlighted in yellow. They will have that, so vehicles will be coming in to pick up the runner that just finished their leg of the race, and then that will also drop off the runner that's going to take off from Cool and Camp Park and continue on for their portion of the journey. So they will have portable toilets available that they'll bring in and take out the next day. We've received liability insurance from the event organizers, and we don't have anything else scheduled taking place at Cool and Camp Park on that same day. So they have used this park in the past, and we haven't had any issues. Other city staff, including the police department, have been contacted and are in support of this. So just seeking Parks Commission approval for the use of Cool and Camp Park for the Ragnar events on Friday, August 12th. Any questions? I'm happy to answer them.
Actually, I just have one. Going around the lake, I believe right at Cool and Camp, they have road construction. Is that stuff going to be taken care of by then?
They have consulted with the police department
Okay.
regarding the route and any of the, around North Shore and all of that. So our responsibility is recommendation of approval for the use of the park area.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion. They've been here before. They've been a real asset. It's fun to kind of participate in watching and knowing them, so I'm glad to make a recommendation that we continue to have them.
Okay, so we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
So we have a motion and a second, is there any other discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and abstain, motion carries.
All right, we'll move along here to our next agenda item, which is very similar in nature. It's another park event permit application for consideration of approval tonight, submitted by Tracker Boat Center of Forest Lake. And again, this is now their second annual event here at Lakeside Memorial Park. So included in the staff memo is a little picture from last year where they did use Lakeside Memorial Park for their first ever fishing tournament that they have for Tracker Boat. And they use Lakeside Memorial Park. So this year, they're looking at Saturday, August 13th, from 6 in the morning until 3 p.m. And really, they don't use a whole lot of the park space. They do use some of the green area, as you can see pictured near our boat dock, our public dock access. They do use a portion of the parking lot for boat trailer parking. And really just, it's most of the day people are out fishing. They come in and do a live weigh-in at 1:30, and they're usually out of the park by about 3:30 after they pick up everything. So again, last year we didn't have any challenges. The city did work with them on the parking. We didn't have any complaints or issues come forward. And really they had a great experience, and I'm happy to see them back again this year. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, again, looking for approval of the park event permit for Lakeside Memorial Park for Saturday, August 13th.
I'll make a motion for the Tracker Bass Fishing Tournament on August 13th.
Second?
So we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and abstain? Motion carries. We go on to the Forest Lake Baseball Association and the Cooling Camp improvements.
All right, so for the Forest Lake Baseball Association Cooling Camp Park improvements requests, today I just want to take a few minutes to talk about our Cooling Camp Park and some of the improvements that Forest Lake Baseball Association has made in the past. Tonight, we are just looking for approval on 3 new projects that they would like to work on at Cooling Camp Park. So I'm going to just kind of walk through this with you guys quick here. As you are probably aware, the Forest Lake Baseball Association has been working over the last few years to make improvements to the fields out at Cooling Camp Park. Their goal is to have these be premier fields for their baseball association. Currently, there's the 13 and under field, I believe, is complete. And some of these projects here that you see listed will help complete some of the other fields. Complete meaning it's, got the sideline extensions, dugouts with shelter on them. And their intent is to make these premier fields for their athletic association. So the 3 projects they're looking at and coming to the Parks Commission for just approval on the projects themselves to complete. Project 1 is a storage shed with a timeline of yet maybe late summer, early fall. Project 2 is dugout roofs and dugout fencing for Field 1. Again, that's something they'd like to complete this year. And Project 3, backstop extension, sideline, and outfield fencing for Field 4. And that's tentative for next year. I just wanted to talk a little bit about our current agreement that we do have with the Forest Lake Area Athletic Association. We do have language in there that says, they do need city's approval for any improvements at our fields. Cooling Camp has been added to that agreement this year, so this would fall into line with seeking city approval to complete these projects. Once these additions are made or these improvements, they do become property of the city. So that is written in agreement that we are currently in with the Forest Lake Area Athletic Association. Abby and I are going to look with our legal counsel on just a simple modification or agreement specific to these improvements, should they be approved to move forward. I just want to talk a little bit about funding. As noted in the staff memo, the Forest Lake Baseball Association has agreed to fully fund both Project 1 and 2 that they want to complete this year. So there's not been any ask of the city to provide any financial contribution on these 2 projects. They're happy to get those complete. And being that Project 3 is slated for next year, we have not had any conversation on funding. Should that come forward to the Parks Commission or the city to participate, we will bring that back to the Parks Commission. Again, it's just approval to complete these projects so we can have these fields completed and continue the planning process moving forward. I did include some pictures just to kind of give you a baseline of what they've done already at some of the other fields and what they're looking to do. So here's Field 1. This is what it looks like today. And they want to complete the dugouts. So that's something that would be the end result. And then similarly, just to get you, the sideline and outline fencing. I don't have the great picture of the outfield, but, go around the back and then behind here is that backstop extension, just as a safety precaution. So they would like to complete that on Field 4 as well. Again, that's slated for 2023. So again, tonight, just seeking approval of the projects. Again, if any cost sharing or funding for Project 3 would be requested, we will bring that back. I'm happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, seeking a motion of approval for the 3 projects by the Forest Lake Baseball Association.
I'll make a motion to approve the 3 projects per staff recommendation, noting that any funding requests would come back to this commission.
So we,
Second that.
so we have a motion and a second. Just for discussion purposes, Jamie, the actual baseball association is aware too, I know higher level FLA, but the baseball association is aware that if they purchase this, that it does become the city's.
I believe so. We will be working through that with our legal counsel to make sure that all of that is understood before we move forward, just seeking approval of the projects. And again, we'll consult with legal and make sure that's all understood and clear.
The only other thing I would add, just again for discussion purposes, is that they really are a gift to the city. They have made some pretty significant enhancements to cooling camp, and they've done just a tremendous job, so.
Close that comment and add that they're a tremendous partner for the city and for all of the people that live in our area, that we can't thank them enough sometimes,
Yeah.
but it's
Done a
good they
great
take the
job.
funding. They do a great job.
Yeah, they do. And with a kid in the program now, who's played at Cooling Camp 1, the dugout improvement would be great for them because like the other day, we were out there for practice, 100-degree day, and no shade, no anything, so I think it's great.
So we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing no other discussion, all in favor? Aye. Opposed and abstain? All right, motion carries. So we are on to the Danager Park dedication.
Thank you, Chair. Luke Daninger owns an unaddressed agricultural parcel located off 190th Street North. I do have it up on the screen for you to see where the location is. He's proposing to split the parcel into 2 lots, each of them being pretty sizable, still remain agricultural lots. City Code Section 152-090 or Ordinance 707 requires land dedication to be made at the time of subdivision for park purposes. We recently revised our parkland dedication ordinance. Does require that the city do individualized analysis on each parcel to determine what is appropriate amount of parkland dedication. When we look at lot splits can have varying analysis. So for the Daninger parcel, and then you'll see another one directly after this, the staff had actually determined that based on kind of a fair market value or assessed valuation, the parkland dedication fee for this property would be well over $12,000. The next property you'd see would be less than $2,000. We've been advised by our legal counsel to remain for these lot splits at a $3,500 per lot dedication fee, should the city choose a fee in lieu of land dedication. When it comes to parkland dedication for the property is not slated for any sort of future recreation needs within the city at this time. There is a trail proposed along 190th Street. We have been in discussions with the owner about an acquisition of an easement for trail purposes along 190th. We're in a little bit of a pickle because 190th all the way across from 61 to where it ends. Still getting my street names right here, but it looks like Harrow Avenue North. The roadway was actually built over those private properties, so right now there's a prescriptive easement for the roadway. We're in discussions with our legal counsel about that trail easement acquisition, but this time we're bringing this before you because we believe that there is a nexus for requesting land or a fee in lieu of land dedication of $3,500, and then if possible to acquire that trail easement. So our request to you tonight is to make a recommendation to the city council to accept a fee in lieu of land dedication and, if possible, acquire a trail easement along 190th Street. And do you have any questions for me? Otherwise, the property owner, Luke Daninger, is here if you have questions for him.
Did you say the fee was $3,500
$3,500
plus the trail easement?
plus the trail easement.
Okay.
How did they come up with the amount?
So we recently redid our parkland dedication ordinance based on statutory case law. And that case law indicates that there needs to be some sort of individualized assessment for properties to determine whether or not the fee per lot is sufficient. So when it comes to most new developments, we look at an assessed valuation or a fair market value valuation of 10% of the lot area. For individual minor lot splits like this, the city had adopted the fee schedule at $3,500 per lot. That is up, I believe, for $1,000 per lot from where it was even earlier this year, where we used to have a $2,500 per lot fee. So the actual assessment of why it went from $2,500 to $3,500, I believe, was done, and that was just shortly before I came, but I believe the assessment was done just based on what the industry trend is requesting at the time of lot subdivision.
Keep adding and making it difficult for people sometimes to pay those fees, and just wondered what the argument or the topic was as far as how they did that.
I can say that when we use the individualized analysis method, the assessment or the requested dedication fee in lieu was significantly higher, well over, as I noted, $12,000. We didn't think that that was a fair assessment. And for these individual minor lot splits, we believe the $3,500 one-time contribution for the additional lot to help contribute to future park land improvements, acquisition is fair within the climate that we're in.
I guess I have one question. So it's a $3,500 fee, but then we're also asking for an easement?
Well, we are hoping to secure an easement. Mr. Daninger has asked about some sort of fair compensation for that easement. It could be possible that the fee in lieu of land dedication is reduced. We are working with kind of two different items here, one being a parkland dedication ordinance, not necessarily trail. So we are working through the legality of this with our legal counsel of whether or not both could be acquired, or if the easement would be reduced, the fair market value of the easement would be reduced from the $3,500 per lot dedication. I think the recommendation that we're seeking is the fee in lieu of land dedication and easement, that we would then consult with our legal counsel on how to balance that out. I will say that there are some challenges in acquiring the easement through here just because of the historic roadway and how we end up kind of figuring out where that easement line runs with relationship to unplatted roadway.
So, oh, go ahead.
Is this plot right near the family
Yes.
farm? It's right next to it, that's what I was thinking, because I don't ever see anything kind of park in there. In the
No.
area. And
No, it's
so-
all agricultural land.
Exactly.
Mr. Daninger is just looking to split off a piece of the family's farmland so that he can eventually maybe build a house someday near his family's properties.
You're gonna keep the good chocolate milk, no matter what. Okay.
For my general knowledge on this, after the subdivision of this property, does a future subdivision of the remaining farmland result in a requirement to provide land or cash in lieu?
Yes, future subdivisions. Every time we create a new lot, a new lot, it can be residential or non-residential, it does trigger the land dedication requirements. So let's just say between the two lots that are being split someday, ooh, that got big. someday one of these parcels, and I'm not gonna assume which one Mr. Daniger wants to build on someday, but let's say the larger parcel, parcel B, is proposed for a 100-unit subdivision. At that time, we would reassess new parkland dedication or determine whether or not a park would be appropriate on the site.
Good, thank you.
Okay, just for my clarification purposes, so we're recommending to council a trail easement, and we don't know the fair market value of that easement.
We do not know the fair market value of the easement. We're working through a couple different challenges right now. Because the right-of-way is not platted and the landowner is not seeking a plat, we're trying to determine how it is that we might be able to acquire an easement for not only the trail, but also right-of-way and utilities. So the cost for the fair market value for a trail is in addition to fair market value for an easement for the roadway and utilities. It's kind of we're in a, I would say, a more interesting, probably not completely uncommon circumstance where we have these agricultural splits. But I would say it's pretty unique right now for us to be working with properties that we have these historic roads crossing over the properties themselves. So we're still just in consultation with the legal counsel on how we address this. If that makes sense?
Yep, and then just for my purposes, where is the 3,500 in the code? Because I could find the minor subdivision,
It is in our fee schedule, and
so it's in the fee schedule, it's not part of the parkland dedication.
nope, it is not. They are separate. So the fee schedule was adopted by Ordinance 706. That actually is where we've adopted that parkland dedication requirement. The city code section, 706 has not been updated, excuse me. Give me just a second, I can find that code section for you.
It might be nice, this is a separate piece and I can email you this, but it might be nice under the dedication requirements where we talk about the minor subdivision to link back to the the fee structure so that you see the correlation between the two within the code.
Sure. I know that we are looking at updating the land development regulations in 2023 because they are quite messy. I think that when the city and the township combined, they literally just tried to do this and really never kind of cross-analyzed them. So those are some definite, I take that with as kind of adding it to our list of things that we need to improve upon.
And I'm gonna ask one more question, and
Sure.
So part of what I struggle with a little bit here is this is different than a builder coming in and, you know, a major builder coming in and creating a subdivision. This is a family-owned plot of land that, in my mind, is continuing to be within the family, at least at this point for this particular piece. So is it a requirement to do either one of these, or is there an option because they've already, in some aspects, paid their taxes and own this land within the family? It's a little bit more unique to me, I guess.
I can check with our city attorney. I think the land dedication applies to any subdivision, residential or non-residential. Residential is what we kind of determine this as opposed to non-residential agricultural, which there's kind of a difference there in terms of fee schedule and structure and how we figure things out. I can ask whether or not we can exempt it, but I will note we're going to have the very next application is going to be a minor subdivision. The next
Yep, we're gonna
two.
set a precedence potentially, and I think that's where, I guess, like I said, I struggle with it a little bit because it's staying, maybe I'll ask for clarification. It's my understanding that it's staying within the same family.
Correct.
And
Yeah, I just want to split it to essentially restructure loans. So that's the whole reason for the split.
So,
How do you feel about the fee?
can you come up, do you mind coming up here just so we can?
Yeah.
Thank you.
How do I feel about the fee? Yeah, I'm not thrilled by it, I guess. You know, to me, it makes sense for a developer, but my goal is not to develop it, it's to keep farming it and hopefully build a house there. The proposed bike path, and I communicated this to Abby too, like, I don't necessarily have a problem with the easement, but I farm that lane currently, and so that'd be a loss of income as well, if that goes to a bike path. And so, you know, there's obviously a cost to that too.
Sure.
So those would be my concerns, I guess, with it.
Thank you.
And the next subdivision doesn't seem to be the same at all as far as family land being separated and used, or did I read that wrong?
I don't know what the intention of Mr. Siemens, you know, it may be to be sold, it may not, I don't
That
know
makes
that
a
one.
big difference, because I do agree that this family has been farming in that area for so many years, paying for the property, that I don't look at them as a developer at all. And you said you'd check into that, but
Sure, I don't know that the ordinance was created specifically about development necessarily. It's about subdivision, and so I can look into that, but I would caution the commission on precedence, just because you are about to review 2 additional minor subdivision requests. And I think the fair application of them, even if we might not like them, is, or the application of them in a fair and consistent manner is probably something that is gonna hold better than
you can have a
consideration.
caveat in there as far as family-owned property or
No.
development coming in.
No.
I don't know why I couldn't do that, but.
Well, sounds like it's not there.
It
You
isn't
can,
there.
I think, do that on a different level, not on our level. So, I understand.
So I do have one more question based on what we heard tonight. So if the trail causes, the easement takes into consideration the fair market value, does it also include revenue impacts, and how do we balance? This is my first time I've seen one like this, so I've got lots of questions, but do we balance the loss of revenue into consideration as, how does that work? Or can
I
he
don't
come
have an
back?
answer
Okay,
on that. I don't.
okay.
That would only, again, be fair. If you're taking away opportunities for, for an income.
Sure, at this time, even with an easement, the owner would be able to, continue to farm his land. It's at the time that we'd be seeking to improve the road, the trail, is when we would be having further discussions. All of this is new territory, I think, for the city. We're going to see more of these, though. We have another one coming up. It's not a lot split, but it is taking agricultural land and dividing it. And how we look at some of these considerations is gonna probably be tricky.
So what are, just again, because this is a new situation for me and I'm trying to learn. So you determine the fair market value of that trail. Does he have the opportunity to
We would,
disagree or counter, and will it come back here then?
it will not come back before this commission. You're an advisory commission. And so it really is a recommendation to whether or not the council would want to purchase that easement for the price negotiated by city staff with the property owner.
Okay, so right now, if we make a recommendation that it is 3,500 plus the trail easement, there's no backing out of that, or it has to be city council, just to make sure I'm
I mean, it's
understanding.
ultimately the city council's decision, so it's just seeking a recommendation, very much like the downtown plan. Now, if this commission says, no, you don't want to recommend that fee in lieu of land dedication and/or an easement, we can convey that to the council. But ultimately, it would come down to the council's decision of whether or not they want this, strictest application of land in lieu of fee dedication.
Okay. Thank
Everything out there is all pretty much agricultural, correct?
To the west of this property, we've got some single-family residential, when it's closer to Highway 61. I know we've been fielding inquiries because the future land use kind of guides some of that for more industrial or business park uses. So we might be seeing other applications come along that 190th corridor. I'd still have a hard time believing it's going to be any time within the next, by 2030, because our urban services really just don't even extend out to this area yet.
I don't know if we have to have a formal yes or no to that.
We do.
But depending on how it turns out, could you add that in lieu of a different situation, that it could be looked at differently, even though you have some work coming up, they're not all identical, and that you could take that individually, even as far as what the amount is?
I don't know, Commissioner Moorhead, that approach is necessarily the most sustainable for the city, and I think that it needs to be a fairly well-grounded approach of how we're doing them based on these individualized analysis. We've been advised that each property is reviewed on its own for the land dedication. The land dedication for this one would be $12,000. We're recommending $3,500 because we think that $12,000 is excessive. I can consult with our attorney's office about modifications, but I think us picking and choosing when and how it's applied might not be fair and equitable.
Just to clarify, you're not saying picking or choosing, but the document that we got that we approved had a piece in here that says the parkland dedication fee guidelines shall be determined by the city council on an individualized basis. And we had asked for an understanding when they come forward to us what that individualized basis was, and from a transparency standpoint. So individualized basis could potentially mean lots of things.
Individualized basis means it's fairly specific in just what's going through case law right now. There needs to be some sort of nexus in the request for land or fees dedicated for parkland uses. And so that nexus is based on what is the property that's existing and what is the impact that that development is going to have on the future park, trail, and open space system. The individualized analysis is the assessment of the valuation of the property in relationship to the ordinance requirements of 5%, 10% land dedication. So that individualized analysis is very much a basis of the financial, the fee in lieu. You'll see more of these coming forward as we do more subdivision review. These numbers will change for everything. What we're saying as a community, though, is for minor subdivisions where we are splitting off one lot, the one-time $3,500 fee seems to be a fair value when you look at some lots might not pay as much when you're looking at a per acreage or per dollar value of a property.
So this is the precedent you're setting, whereas it should have been $12,000, making the judgment that that's too much, and now $3,500 is going to be the amount that's charged here forward.
$3,500 is what was adopted by the city council in our fee schedule in consultation with our legal counsel. Legal counsel is the one who said, oh, it looks like when we're looking at a minor subdivision, some could be really high and some could be really low. Therefore, we would defer to that fee schedule.
See, that's where I think there's a little wiggle room when they're looking at all of this to determine what kind of property that they're subdividing and use that in their analysis of what the fee should be. As long as they're individualizing it all, I don't know why that wouldn't be able to be in there.
We certainly can take that back to our legal counsel. I just think that the application of anything more than residential, non-residential is going to be tricky in application.
I guess I have another, well, two questions. So if an apartment building comes in, it's $3,500 per unit, correct, Ben?
It's only at the time of land subdivision. It's, the state of Minnesota doesn't allow us to charge land.
On a whole apartment building.
So it's only at the time of land subdivision, and apartment buildings are not a subdivision of land. You're just creating multiple units on one piece of land. So.
But the total cost of that unit, we're gonna get more parkland dedication.
So if it's, no.
I thought that's, I'm sorry.
Nope, and that's okay. So land dedication is only applied at the time subdivision, the creation of a new lot or more are created. We cannot charge it on multifamily development. Now, that being said, if you have a parcel such as the Headwaters development, where you had some commercial and you've got some multifamily, when that developer originally came in with a land subdivision, then we looked at a per acreage analysis. Didn't matter if it was going to be multifamily or if it was going to be commercial, because the subdivision was occurring. But at the time of site plan review and building and permitting, if they build 100 apartments on there, there's no additional land subdivision. There's no additional cost captured.
This
And
is the first time we've gone through the new, that's why there's so many questions.
That's
This is a
fine.
big change for,
Yeah. And my second question is, it's agriculture, and is that a gravel road right now?
It's like quasi pavement, it's like packed rock.
Probably a chip seal.
Yeah, there you go.
Chip sealed? Okay. And that's been like that for a long time?
They did that maybe 8 years ago,
Okay.
something like that.
So, let me go back to Jason's question about the apartment.
Sure.
So, in Headwaters, number of new apartments going up. And at the time it was subdivided, and they identified this is going to be an apartment on this piece of, do apartments ever pay anything?
No. So if you
So
just
we-
got a vacant piece of land right now and there is no subdivision action, apartments do not contribute to the parkland dedication.
I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, I remember apartments going up and we would have to sit down and talk about the cash in lieu of cash or parkland, and we always took cash.
So for like the Headwaters development, at the time that Headwaters Village was being developed, it may have been considered that there would be an apartment building in that neighborhood. And at the time, Headwaters Village or their subsequent plats, Fitzgerald Flats, I think was one of them. I think there was a Headwaters 3rd or 7th. Each time of those plats and subdivisions occurred, then yes, there was a consideration of parkland dedication because it was actually a subdivision of the land. It didn't matter what the use was necessarily, though.
So it was just the 10% of the land's value?
Yeah, I mean, depending on what the, at the time, what the use, I mean, the use is considered because we have it distinguished between residential and non-residential. A residential development is required to dedicate 10+%, whereas non-residential is 5%. So I think that might be why we were looking at this will be multifamily, and that's where we were looking at this would have the residential density calculation. I'm not sure, I can't entirely speak to the application before, but it wasn't necessarily because 100 apartments were being created. It was because there was a subdivision that was occurring, and there was probably a per acreage charge if land was not being dedicated.
it was per unit.
Before
it used to be per unit.
I think that's right.
And that, and that might be,
So
and that
that's-
might
it's
be
just
part
a
of the,
change.
might be part of the cleanup. I do know,
Maybe
that
why
there
they
were
changed.
have been many practices that weren't well grounded by our legal team.
So any new development, any multi-level new development coming in, it's going to be $3,500.
No, it is
No.
not a per unit multifamily charge. It's an area
Area
charge,
charge.
or, yes, so let's just say, Hidden Creek's not a good example. Did they see Shadow Creek's concept plan? Let's just say we have a development and they are looking at a multifamily, they're gonna split the lot and one will be multifamily and one will be another residential subdivision. We'd assess that whole parcel based on 10% of the area. Do we want 10% as parkland, or do we wanna look at that individualized analysis for parkland fee in lieu of dedication?
So, I guess,
So
my, I
there
guess,
is no $2,500
No.
per.
I guess,
No, this goes back to the document that we received a few meetings ago, and if you look at it, non-residential property, this is where we had, this is the first time we're applying what we talked about. I think it was a few months ago, but non-residential property, it says in here, is an estimated 5% of the net area, which changed, it used to be gross. But an estimated 5% of the net area shall be dedicated for public space on the non-residential property. So it's no longer that formula we had of the number of units times 2,500 or whatever it was.
so
That's
basically,
gone.
yeah, it's gone, and now it's less than.
For
It's less
a
than.
non-residential, for an apartment building, yes. The new, but remember, this was based on the state statutes as well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought we were conforming to the state laws.
We are. The state has never allowed a city to capture parkland dedication when subdivision doesn't occur. So had the city been applying a per unit on a multifamily development, the city was doing that illegally. And so now we have a new ordinance. We're trying to apply it the first time. There's lots of questions, but it is based on subdivision.
Mr. Danninger, thank you for your patience.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so back to Mr. Manager here. So this is one where we need to make a motion.
I guess the one thing I'm struggling with is the easement. I mean, we're asking the owner that's subdividing it to pay a fee and then also say, we want an easement. I guess that's where I'm struggling right now.
Sure.
So is there a way that you can help?
This commission certainly could recommend to the city council, I mean, you certainly could recommend to the city council if the easement is more desirable, if there is a desire for an easement, recommend to the city council to try to acquire an easement for trail purposes and the fair market value reduce the $3,500 fee in land or cash in lieu of land dedication. You can also make the recommendation that no land dedication be required, but the city seek a trail easement at a fair market value. I mean, I think that there's some different options you have here. Staff's recommendation is to apply the land dedications requirement equally and seek an easement. And I understand that might seem excessive, but at the time of development, it's pretty standard for us to seek out the means necessary for the public improvements that run across private property.
Could you separate that into two motions?
You certainly can. Yep, I think that we can convey that however this commission needs.
Go ahead, Jason.
I guess, I'll try it here. I guess I'll make a motion for the $3,500 and no easement. I'm trying to,
Make it in one motion then?
So what would that be, just for clarification, a recommendation for the city to accept the standard $3,500 fee in lieu of land dedication and to not require a trail easement at this time?
correct.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I would propose an amendment to that motion, and that would be along the lines that we heard before, that the $3,500 that had been identified as the price for this subdivision, that it be applied to any, to a negotiation of the easement. That if you're negotiating the easement, we start off with $3,500 that Mr. Daninger would have paid as a part of it, and if there's anything greater than that required, we add that to the 3,500.
So I would say that's probably different, and I think I would defer to the chair, but I would say Commissioner Steenblock would need to accept that
Would need
amendment,
to
because that is a
accept it.
different,
Yep.
I think, motion.
I guess can we still do discussion right at this moment?
You did have a,
You have a motion, but we don't have a second yet,
Okay.
and so,
I'll second it for discussion.
okay, so
I guess the question that I have is, so if about the easement and he's working the land, the dollar amount over the years is probably gonna be greater that he's gonna be able to make on the land versus the easement. That's where I'm trying to understand this a little bit more. So-
Definitely, and these are things that staff are, would work through with the applicant. I think we really just, if, these are gonna be tough, and it's a hard case to be our guinea pig.
but we only have one crack at it on this
Right.
commission, so we have to get it right, because it doesn't come back here.
And the fact is that it may be years before there's any, that easement is utilized.
I think it makes sense, though, to have that protection piece if city council does not accept our recommendation, because we are just an advisory board. We're not making the decision here.
Right.
We're giving a recommendation, and if the city truly wants to, the city council truly wants to try to enforce this easement or negotiate an easement, we should have that, like you said, the starting fee of 3,500, apply towards that negotiation process. So I think that makes sense.
So am I hearing it right, then you're saying that would be deducted from the 335?
The $3,500,
For,
if the city is going to pay something for the easement, so we start off with saying it could be as much as $3,500 that Mr. Daninger has in his pocket to apply. Maybe it isn't, maybe the easement is worth $2,000, so Mr. Daninger has to pay $1,500.
or it's worth 10,000,
Yeah.
and
And
the city pays him,
65.
it's just,
I guess I still like it cleaner, as Jason said it, and they'll get our point that we don't think
don't want the
that's,
easement.
that is a good idea to do that, and if we're only an advisory, and if they wanna make any
They're gonna-
changes, they're
Mhm.
gonna do it anyway,
Agree
but
with
at least
that.
they'll give an opinion, if it turns out to be the opinion of this commission, that we didn't think that was a good idea. So, I don't know.
Okay, so the motion on the table that has been seconded is that we require the 3,500 and eliminate the easement. Is that correct?
Yes.
So we have a motion and we have a second. Do we have any further discussion on that?
I'll just say I would vote no on that.
So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
Farming.
Could technically have done a friendly amendment, but. Good luck.
That was the longest, easiest one we have ever done.
I know.
All right, so we are on to is it Seaman
Yes.
subdivision?
Yes, Gabriel Seaman owns a property at 402 8th Street Southwest, and just like the prior application, he's looking to conduct a minor subdivision. A minor subdivision is the splitting off of one lot onto a property. Again, the city code ordinances do require any subdivision for properties to dedicate land, or if land dedication isn't feasible or practical, to consider this commission to recommend consideration of cash in lieu of land dedication. It's not an area that's designated for any parks or trails. This is one that staff would say is a fairly strong candidate for the fee in lieu of land dedication. Now, that being said, this is one when we did do the individualized analysis, the dollar figure was lower than the $3,500 amount. But as a community and seeking our legal counsel, we've determined that that $35 amount is kind of that across the board for, as a city as a whole, for all residential minor subdivisions. $3,500 is a suitable and a reasonable amount for the contribution of one additional home into the community, that is their contribution to the parkland dedication program. So with this one, staff would recommend the city accept a $3,500 cash fee in lieu of land dedication for the minor subdivision. Any questions for me?
How was it determined that this one was less than, and
Because we look at assessed valuation of property, and smaller properties have a smaller assessed value than larger properties. So in the previous application, you had a considerable amount more of land area that had a considerable amount more of assessed value.
any questions on this one, or looking for a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept staff recommendation and ask for the $3,500 cash in lieu fee.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second, do we have any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and abstain, so that motion carries. Abby, we're getting better as we go down the list.
No, you know, there's, some will be easy, some will not. And I'll tell you that as we go through this and you see future developments, some are gonna be easy, some are not. We start to even, in some circumstances, get into those combination of land dedication and fee in lieu, and they'll be a little bit messy, I think, so. For all of us, I'm new here too, so we made it through, so.
All right, so next on the list is the Eve Forest Lake minor subdivision as well.
Norhart Construction is seeking the city's approval for a minor subdivision and site plan amendment to construct a factory building on an unaddressed parcel along Highway 97. They are looking to relocate their factory operation site, which will have 2 parcels of land in a new configuration. So right now it is 2 parcels. And I apologize because I think I might have, oh, excuse me. So right now, let's go back really quick. There are 2 parcels. This unyellowed portion is a part of their overall development plan, and then the yellowed portion is also a part of their development plan. What will end up happening is that existing lot line will get moved around the single-family residence, and that newly configured land will end up being subdivided into 2 parcels that will contain 2 factory buildings. We're gonna have a precast concrete panel site and then also a steel frame construction building. So essentially, it's gonna help support their multifamily builder business. So again, ordinance number 707 indicates that the city, at the time of any land subdivision, will acquire parkland or land for the purposes of parkland. When land is not feasible or practical, the city may consider cash fee in lieu of land dedication. So when looking at this site, the site is not guided for any sort of future parkland development. It is a site that is contemplated as having a future trail along the Highway 97 corridor, in which MnDOT is making plans for at this time that will run on MnDOT right-of-way. The site is definitely well poised for having trail connection access within 1/4 mile to Hardwood Creek, and then allowing for connection wrapping around to Fenway when Fenway's trail system is expanded. This site is located within 1 mile walking distance to 2 parks. I believe they were listed in the think one is Summerfield, and I believe the Fenway Park as well. So we've got a couple different significant park resources that'll be available within the area. So again, the city code, kind of trying to model state statute and case law that is going on right now, is looking at the nexus of whether or not, or what is the impact to the park, trail, and open space system. We look at the city's existing parks, trail, open space plan. We've determined, at least in 2014, we determined that we have a 0.4 acre deficit per every 1,000 people within the community. We are in need of additional parkland. We've also determined that these parks, trails, and open space system are a vital component of healthy and the well-being of both the local economy and our workforce. In fact, we have determined that we have just shy of 7,000 commuters that are coming into the city of Forest Lake to work during daytime hours. And those commuters, those employees, are having an impact onto our public systems, including the park, trail, and open space systems. So we do believe that the combination of the influx of workers and also just growing movement of our workforce to encourage healthy lifestyles amongst our employees, that there is a reason for land dedication or fee in lieu. Given the fact that land dedication isn't called for in our comp plan in this location, staff would recommend that we do look at a fee in lieu of land dedication, utilizing that individualized assessment of 5% of the assessed value. That land dedication does come out to $40,674. Now, this one is another one of those hard ones, but this commission is tasked tonight to make a recommendation to the city council regarding how to apply the land dedication for a non-commercial or a non-residential development, non-residential subdivision. And staff's recommendation would be the equal application of that 5% of the assessed value of $40,000, $40,674.
Sorry, Abby, just one thing, so we are using 5% of the net area, is that correct? Or 5%
Of net developable, and this property does not have any wetland buffers
Yeah.
that would be removed from that, so
okay.
we are using the net developable.
I just wanted to make sure.
I double check really quick that on that statement, because I do think now that you question that, there is something up in the northeast corner of it that may end up needing to be removed. Regardless, what the commission could do, if you are favorable of using the straight 5% 5% valuation, that you could make that recommendation to accept a fee in lieu of land dedication based on the city code requirements with the city council's final determination, or that final determination by the time the city council reviews it.
Are we saying the same thing? Because the code says an estimated 5% of the net area.
Yep.
So we're saying the same thing?
I just want to verify.
Just to verify if there isn't a wet.
Yeah,
Okay.
I want to say that there might be a wetland buffer up on the east, on one of the sides of the property. And so therefore, we would omit those areas which were not omitted in the $40,674 calculation. I'll also let you know, Marie Dickover with Norhart Construction is here if you have questions of the applicant of the development or their discussion with you.
I have a question. How close is that to the private individual houses? Is it going to be right next door to them?
We bought one of them, and then there's a small, like 2.5 acre parcel that we're pruning around, but we aren't.
Can we ask you to come up to the podium? Thank you.
Sure, and I can also show you here on the site plan. Here are the two existing homes. We are looking at a significant distance to the property lines of both of those houses, and then they are proposing some wooded area and berming along those westerly property lines to help keep that buffer from those properties.
And the one to the east is the one that we're purchasing along with the field.
Okay. Has there been communication with any of the other neighbor? It would look like only one or two would be affected.
The other neighbor we have talked to, but we haven't shown them the plans, but we'd be berming up like a dirt pile and then planting trees on the top of it, but we haven't approached them with that design.
And what is I live across the highway from that.
Okay.
So where is the entrance to the property going to be?
I can pull that up for you too, Marie. I just want to pull up the site plan for folks, because I recognize I didn't include that. Typically, just in land dedication, we're not looking at site plan improvements. So it's offset from the Fondant Avenue North.
It's directly across from,
It's offset from it. So up on their screen here is Fondant Avenue North. The access point into the site would be at a distance from there.
okay,
MnDOT is seeking changes to this roadway that
Yep.
will be a divided, separated. So this will be a right-in, right-out with a turn lane off 97.
and these will be trucks that carry prefabricated cement
Yep.
portions? or
Yeah,
whatever?
so our plan is to, on the farther back building is a precast concrete plant that would be manufacturing them, and then the trucks would be hauling them out.
Mhm.
So it'd be semi-trucks. And then the main building would be assembling wall panels for apartment buildings.
How many employees?
We're thinking, like, we're headed towards automation, and so we're thinking we probably won't get more than 30 to 50 employees there. But I think initially it's around 30.
And MnDOT has looked at the additional truck traffic on 97. I mean, I feel sorry for anyone who lives anywhere near having to get out on 97.
Yeah, MnDOT has, we've sent them the plans. They had some comments about, because they're gonna be reconstructing 97 in the next couple of years, so they had some comments about adding a temporary turn lane, but when they put that, the parkway, like the divided highway in, then it'll just be right in, right out.
But now it'll be a temporary easement out to the 97 anyway. Not easement, but what did you say,
The
temporary what?
temporary left turn lane.
Right.
But again, we're focused on the
I
park
know.
dedication fees.
Yeah.
I will note, it is scheduled for the Planning Commission next week. So some of these questions that you have as citizens, it is a public hearing. The staff report for that will go out, I believe, it'll go out by the end of the week. I think it's scheduled to go out tomorrow.
I guess comment on 97, if they're, first of all, if they're going to redo it and we want a trail along 97, there's gotta be a cement barriers, because 97 is,
I don't
so
have.
that's a
There-
comment for,
Just,
Sure.
that's just a
keeping
comment.
in mind our scope is to look at the park dedication fees here. You guys are like herding cats.
And I will note that the city has been the city's engineering office has been involved with the design of the 97 corridor. I believe that the trail along 97, it will be an off-street trail,
Okay.
Yeah.
not an on-street trail.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna
Thank
say,
you.
we're adding 2 acres to that right of way along the north side of the property along 97, where they're doing I think it's expanding the road and then adding a walking path.
Yeah, so along this right-of-way, MnDOT's acquiring additional land from the private landowner, and that land will be utilized for the widening of the road and that trail.
I make a motion that we approve the Forest Lake minor subdivision park dedication fee with the caveat that it is adjusted after reevaluating whether or not that wetland is in there.
Second that.
So we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion on that? Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed and abstain? Motion carries. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so next on the agenda is 6A, which is a discussion item for the bench dedication program.
Okay, let me get my notes really quick, folks. As some of the commission may know, the city has received a couple inquiries for bench dedication within just the last couple of months. Being new here, I had asked Jamie just to wait for a second so that we can reevaluate what is our existing policy and where do we need to be. There's a couple of factors for this. It's been 3 to 4 years since the city has, according to Jamie, we talked about it, it's been 3 to 4 years since we've done bench dedications. And we don't really have a formal policy. For commissioners that might not know, really the dedication program was donors would purchase a plaque and the city would put it on the bench. It has been 16 to 17 years since we redeveloped Lakeside Memorial Park, and those benches are nearing the end of their useful life. That was another reason that we wanted to look at what is the program that exists and how might it need to be modified to not only create a sustainable program, but one that's maybe potentially equitable, given the fact that we're gonna have to start a bench replacement program at some point in the future. So that reevaluation has just given us a little bit of time to take a look not only at what kind of adaptive program materials we had, but the existing system as well. It looks like there's about 30 benches in Lakeside Memorial Park. I think there's maybe 6 or 7. It's really hard to walk those circles and keep track of which of the benches you're counting and which ones were dedicated and which ones are not. And I just will show for reference, some of them are getting, really undesirable. It's my understanding that these were installed in phases, 2, maybe 3 phases. And so we really need to start looking at replacing these benches. Most bench dedication programs work where the donor will purchase the bench, provide the city with a plaque, the bench, and maybe a concrete pad if it's a new location, and then the city would install the bench. So what we've been doing is kind of drafting up some program materials to look at a pilot program in Lakeside Park that would implement a system where donors would actually be helping offset the public costs associated with these benches. We would like to have those we will have those program materials for this commission to review next month. In addition to looking at us having a better understanding of which benches are needing replacement, next year, 2 years, 3 years, because we anticipate that over the next probably 1 to probably 4 years, that all of these benches are going to need to be replaced and possibly be replaced with a new bench standard. When it comes to the program that we've been drafting, we've been looking at several different programs, and some of those programs do account for the inclusion of previously dedicated benches. So one of the other things that we'd like to do is take a look at when some of these previous dedications were made and what benches they're on. So this bench right here that we're looking at has been dedicated, and ideally what we'd like to do is be able to call that donor and make sure that if they want to participate in the program kind of moving forward, should we choose to alter the program in a way in which they help offset some of those costs, that we give that first right of inclusion to those donors. Regarding the 2 benches inquiries that we have, the city has a couple different options. We can wait until we have a formal program adopted, or we can follow kind of the existing policy of allowing these donors to provide us with a plaque, or we order a plaque. And do they provide them with us, or we order them? We can order a plaque. And charge the cost back to them, and then install them on the benches. The challenge with that is we have some aging infrastructure, and how we then work with those 2 donors when we need to replace those benches would have to be considered. One thought is that we would advise them now that we would allow them underneath the existing program, but that potentially when that bench needs to be replaced in 2 to 3 years, that we would need to request them asked to essentially kind of rededicate the bench by potentially paying a donor fee if that's how we choose to go. So I know that I put this on just for commission discussion because there's been, I think, a lot of activity in trying to help at least one of the donors within the community. The other one knows that both of them know we're reevaluating the program. The one that I know Commissioner Moorhead has been working with, I've had direct contact with. We're hoping for a dedication by the end of August. There is no way that we could get new benches at all by that time period, have new program materials, have a bench standard, any of that by that time. So it makes sense for these two to follow through with that kind of existing policy, but then as we move to adopt a new policy, keeping communication open with those donors that within the next few years, and they want to continue to dedicate, that we need to include them into the new dedication program.
Wow. That's my only comment there, wow. So you show me Ray Danager's bench, former mayor. They paid for that, and now we're gonna call Mrs. Danager and say, you know, if you wanna keep that or be assured of keeping that, you're gonna have to be charged again at a later point. Does that not seem unfair to everybody, or is it just me?
Forgive me, Commissioner Moorhead, I wasn't aware that donors had been paying for benches.
They didn't pay for, I don't know if they did pay for the bench, but even the sign, you're saying that what would the extra costs be after the new process is in place? What would you be asking just this particular person who dedicated that bench and probably only paid for the sign? I don't think we had them pay for the benches way back then. But they made some memorial for that person. And now, because time passes and we have a new program, we're gonna go back and not grandfather in anybody who's been there and say, we just have to tell you that in a couple of years, we may have to take that sign down unless you wanna rededicate it. My mother-in-law's got a bench down there, and I think if someone would have told me that, I'd feel very offended that at the time we followed the process and that was the dedication. So if you have a new process coming up later on, but allow the process to be grandfathered in, to me is fair, so that we don't have to tell people you pay it now and then you're gonna pay it again later.
I understand. Well, I think a bench only has a useful life of, we're hoping 15 years. These guys have been holding on for a little bit longer than that. That comes at a cost to the city.
Correct.
And so that memorial is being subsidized by the public.
Well, that bench was there because the city should have benches for their community.
Yeah.
What's being done is the sign, and the sign's been paid for by the person who passed on. And so the family that you're referring to, Grandma died, not knowing which particular process is going to be in, and they would like to have the opportunity to put a sign on an existing bench. And to me, that would be grandfathered in, and if we have a new process that isn't going to be done in time for anything, that from then on, anybody who wants to do it will be a part of the new process. But to me, to go back and ask somebody who's had passed on to have their people have to pay more to keep the name there, I don't know. I mean, I'm shocked.
Commissioner Moorhead, we're just researching policies, and I think when we bring a policy forward, this is definitely something that we can outline as for commission discussion. Right now, there isn't a policy because we can't find anything in writing, but we are looking at something that is more sustainable than just allowing somebody to place a plaque on public infrastructure without maybe helping contribute to that system.
And I don't know, how much they would contribute, but to me, the two that we're talking about would have an ability to recognize their deceased member without waiting for us to somehow make a new policy. And so when you suggested that as an option B or something, that's the option that I'd be asking the commission to consider, because they are having a family gathering at the end of August, and they would like to be able to use the money from Grandma to have a sign put on the existing bench.
I think notifying the family that the policy is being looked at makes a lot of sense. I think nothing's infinite. Even the plaque itself over time could degrade. So to think that at some point in time a dedication would go past a useful life, to use your term, seems to make sense to me. So I get where you're coming from, because there wasn't the policy and that wasn't conveyed to you then. But I think as city staff does the research, they'll find that that's commonplace to have a term limit, let's call it.
And just another quick comment too, I know as Abby and I have been navigating through this and having conversations, researching other programs, one thing I have brought up is just our existing Veterans Memorial Program, where we have twice a year deadlines to submit requests or applications to purchase a paver. One consideration is once the pavers are produced for the Veterans Memorial Program, there's still a dedication portion to that. It's not necessarily, Veterans Day, so they don't actually go put the pavers in the ground at that time. They still have a ceremony, they have the actual paver on site, and they do a dedication. So, one solution is if, we could look at is just the paver itself, and then, figure out how we, whether we wait to install that on an existing bench, they still could have the plaque per se for that program is a consideration as we navigate to a more formal policy. The other individual that I have spoken with, is aware that we are looking at this and is okay to wait until we figure some of this out moving forward. I think having in lieu of a policy, obviously it brings some challenges. We've just put plaques on existing benches, so here we are with some challenges of what do we do moving forward, and that is what we're navigating through right now to figure out a good solution for those the existing situation that we have. So hence a written policy with a lot of detail, expectations, and understanding laid out moving forward will help us really alleviate these this current situation that we're in, that we are going to have to navigate through and figure out as city staff and the commission how we will do that. So we're, again, discussion tonight, knowing that it has come up, and really need to continue to work through what that solution would be. So just a comment.
So you're not telling me the solution tonight that you could look wherever you had to look at who we ordered the signs from, and that we couldn't order 2 signs for right now and then move on with the new policy at a certain time? That's off the table now?
No, I don't think that's off the policy. Off the table. It's just, in lieu of having any sort of formalized policy, it seemed like a good time to take a look and just take a break.
And we all agree on that.
Especially too, in lieu of, we're about to put, if that's the road you want to go down, we're about to put brand new plaques on nearly 20-year-old benches. Is that a good system?
I was amazed that you thought they were, I saw the picture now, but I'm down at that park a lot, sitting on the benches, they're solid as a rock. So whether or not they have to be replaced, or if you can take some of the rust on the side off, I don't know. I don't know how many look like that.
I don't know either. We haven't done a thorough inventory, but
So
the lifespan of all infrastructure
and pick out one that's practically brand new and not have to worry about it for a long time. I don't know. It just seems to me that we have constituents or business people here, and they want to do something for Grandma's memorial. This has already been done in the past, and it was, Public Works said they could put another bench. That takes a long time and maybe would interfere with whatever plans the process is going to be. So it seemed to me that just in having two plaques made and paid for by the people, of course, would be a situation where it'd be fair to them, and it wouldn't be excluding having the new policy start now. But to start a new policy now, when they're wanting to bring some closure to it, I don't see it's out of line that we can help these people out. But I'm only one person.
So Abby, did I hear you say that, could we do something, and I know this is just for discussion purposes tonight, there is no vote, but could we do something with these 2 individuals, let them know that we are working on a program, but if they chose to, they could do a plaque now with the caveat that there will be a program that will be put into place that may or may not have some impacts to them?
I have already talked with at least the one business community member that are looking at the memorial in August, and advised that we're looking at a policy change in how we might administer this, and it could include the purchase of or a portion of the costs to help offset the public funding for the bench. They're well aware of potential program changes. So I think I'm hearing at least from one commissioner that, Commissioner Miller, you've indicated you've seen similar maybe programs like this, and there is probably a way that we can help facilitate offsetting some of the public costs with replacement. I've heard that we have these 2 existing ones and requests an existing policy. I think that we can work through this system under this existing policy that is kind of just out there, that we allow people to put plaques on these benches. But I think that we do need to put them on notice that we are exploring these options, and that within the next few years, if replacement happens, that we might need to ask for additional contributions. Now, that being said, we're not there yet. We don't know what that cost is. I'll be honest, I'm not sure we'll be able to get plaques in that time. I hope we will.
That's what my question was gonna be, because I'm all on board with you, but I think that we have to not have discussion tonight, that we have to have a motion so that you can go and find out what the plaques are and get them ordered.
I don't think we need a motion from this commission for, it's,
You can order a plaque without.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
okay.
can administer the existing policy, but I would say that I would ask that this commission set some policy direction, that we're not going to accept other new ones. You know, I don't think that there's gonna be a rush on throwing, requests for plaques on benches, but it's not a well-advertised program. We should try to make it fair and equitable. We've got 2 people that have asked. Let's help try to fulfill their needs, but maybe putting a pause on any new ones until we kind of have some sort of formalized policy in place.
I'm on board with that.
I would agree
Yeah.
with that.
Actually, one question I was just kind of thinking of is, along with the veterans blocks, bricks, I actually purchased one for my dad last year, and blocks kind of came into it. And if we start to run out of benches or anything, we could go to a block, and maybe we could outline the memorial around the stone lakeside, where we'd have more room, and we could put one in each time.
One thing
So
that,
there was just a suggestion idea.
there's a couple different things that have been discussed at City Hall is tree memorials as well. At this point, I wouldn't recommend that we start to move down that route, because they're different. Trees die, they're harder to memorialize without maybe being a nuisance to the tree or to public infrastructure. But I definitely think that this could be a program that could be implemented in any of our parks and open spaces where a bench would be located.
Okay.
I think that it could really help provide a sustainable system for replacement and upkeep of this infrastructure. I'll note that we've got some of these benches, and maybe there is some maintenance, Commissioner Moorhead. Maybe somebody can, sandblast off that rust and repaint it. That comes at a cost to the city. But we don't have funds scheduled for replacement of any benches in Lakeside Memorial Park this year or next. So this
I
could
think they
probably,
both exist without that, but.
But I
And-
think
and
we.
so you could call tomorrow. I mean, I was told that you maybe didn't know who we ordered them from. So I'm just again saying, is this gonna happen tomorrow, that you're gonna try to get them on time? Because maybe you can't. You call tomorrow and they say, hey, we're out 7 months. But would it be able to be, are we in agreement that you could try as early as tomorrow to
I
locate?
can't, Jamie can speak for her workload, but I think that, the commission's direction is to work at obtaining 2 plaques with the hope of having them as soon as possible. To request us to do that tomorrow, I think is demanding too much staff, directing staff a little too specifically.
And I can't make the call because it's in the archives somewhere that
We
we
do-
don't have permission
we
to
do
do.
not.
We will, yeah, we just have to look up past information. Again, we haven't had an order since at least 2019, I believe, without looking back into the notes. So it's been several of years. We've had a few of them, so it's going back to see if that company is still in existence and production, if they still carry that product and those details. So it can be done, and as quickly as we're able to, if that's the direction from Parks Commission, to fulfill those 2 requests that are on the table, and as we navigate the policy discussion.
How many plaques per bench?
Well, one so
One.
far.
So that's their bench forever.
Well, so the way that some of the programs that we've been looking at, if a bench has an estimated useful life of 10, 20 years, I think Public Works Director Adams has indicated that a bench's useful life would be about 15 years. Some programs, what they do is after you're essentially kind of donating that bench for that lifespan. And then as the bench needs replacement, the city will contact you to see if you'd like to re-up the donation for another 15 years.
Seems reasonable.
This is a consequence of not having a policy, because I see both of your sides.
You know,
'Cause
we got along very nicely without it, and now you get a policy, and then you have to have all
But-
sorts of details.
But it is I mean, we're now stuck with, I mean, I'm in I have benches there, right? And so I will not be telling my family that it may go away. I expected that it might, maybe that's because I've been a government employee but I think having a policy in place will help stop some of these issues, and I think we can get these two taken care of, and then get a policy back to us that we can look at, and I think it's fair to make the agreement that if there are additional requests between now and we get and when we get the policy in place, that our message is that we're working on a policy, and there'll be more to come, and we go from there.
Agreed.
Is that fair for you
Yes,
guys?
I just want to verify, Commissioner Moorhead, you were only working with one individual, the Ericksons, correct?
Correct.
Okay. We just wanted to verify that we've got one in-house and one that Commissioner Moorhead, because I wouldn't want to, if there was one other one out there, we'd probably want to make sure that's included as well.
Appreciate that, and it's not, I mean, I might feel a little bit, I don't have a lot of patience to start, but we did start this discussion quite a while ago, and so to me, it's just like, I'm holding my breath, because if I say, soon, I hope so.
And we appreciate your efforts. I would hope that in the future you direct them to work with us to try to filter through some of our processes.
And that's another problem, but at another day,
Sure.
about getting a hold of people and getting calls back.
Okay.
So, I will encourage them.
Feel
And
free to
not
reach.
just them, I don't want to use them as an example. I would like to encourage a lot more people, but with the feedback is that I've called them and they don't call me back. That's not ever a good message to my brain. Because
Sure.
if I'm supposed to direct them to somebody, then I want that somebody to take it over.
Sure. No, I think Jamie has talked about just the bench administration program is easily adding into the parks program. My number's public. Anybody can call me. I will always,
And you'll
I know.
call them back?
I will always call them back. It
That's
might be a
nice.
few days, but yes, I will always call them back.
And I think it's just good timing too, as we're looking at updates to our Parks Trails Open Space Master Plan. We do have, information there about park amenities. We're working on those updates right now, and we're also undergoing updates and a redesign to our city's website yet this year, to be done by the end of the year, so I can incorporate this new program into all of that as well. And will really help us, and I know as staff, moving forward to work efficiently and effectively with our time and resources, having a solid policy in place. So we're all on the same page.
So I just want to, I forgot Commissioner Geyer's comment, so I just want to catch up on a couple comments. She wanted just that she agreed, and I know she doesn't have a vote, but again, relaying her message, that she agreed with taking cash in lieu of land for the subdivisions. And as it relates to the bench dedication, she said being that we've already have dedicated benches in the park, she thought that any current specific requests shouldn't need to wait for a policy. And then, but the fact that the others were installed without a policy should mean that these two should be grandfathered in, so. Which we've already discussed, but again, wanted to honor her feedback that she provided. And she does have some other questions, but maybe they will be covered under staff updates.
Sure. Did you want to do your staff update first?
Sure, I can just do a couple quick staff updates. A couple things that the city is looking at is aligning our commission agendas with the council agendas. Most of the Parks Commission agenda is very similar as the city council's agenda. But one of the things that's being considered is adding consent agendas to our commissions. So, for example, tonight you had the Ragnar relay. I do know that there was a single question on that, as well as the tracker boat races. I think maybe even cooling camp, very little discussion. They were kind of quick motions. Some of those things we're looking at maybe transferring into a consent agenda. For commissioners that don't know, a consent agenda is kind of ordinary routine items with staff recommendations of approval that the commission would consider all in one motion, unless a commissioner or a member of the public would request it being removed. So you might see a change on your next agenda with a consent agenda, and really the idea, I mean, it's 8, it's not that late, but we're at almost 2.5 hours, and the idea just kind of being that we help maybe streamline some of the ordinary routine items that are coming before the commissions. Then the other thing that the city is looking at, I've talked and worked in conjunction with the city administrator, Casey, and our legal team in looking at training for all of our appointed and elected officials. I've only been here for a couple months, but learned it doesn't sound like there's been a lot of onboarding training or even just regular routine commissioner training to talk about the legalities of holding a public hearing, or some of those sorts of things. Really, our attorneys are designed to keep us out of lawsuits. And so I always think training is really a good thing once a year. So I think we'll be looking at some sort of training, I'm hoping by the end of the summer, early August, that would be available for all appointed elected officials. So this commission, planning commission, airport commission, just as an offering, and then we would do that every year kind of moving forward. Other than that, I have no other updates. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, so I'll just run through and respect to time, just some updates as well. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to take them tonight. Otherwise, we can talk as well after the meeting or any email. But I do have about 6 different updates. So to start first, master plan updates. So that's our Parks, Trails, and Open Space Master Plan. Just a reminder, we did get a grant from Washington County Statewide Health Improvement for $10,000. So we are working on a needs assessment of our current parks and trail system. We are also looking at the access and equity component to this analysis. So far with that work, we've had a community input session at Arts in the Park on Tuesday, June 28th. So that was a really great opportunity we had some 2 different boards out where residents or visitors to the community could engage with us on what they love to do, their favorite places in the community. So through that exercise, it was really great to have the opportunity to talk with residents about specific areas, and some people by Clear Lake Park and some by Cooling Camp, and just really ask candid questions about what you like and don't like. And so we took a lot of notes. We did have our survey available at Arts in the Park as well. We didn't get a good response there, just given that there was a lot going on and people are more drawn to putting stickers on a board. We did direct them to our website. As of today, we've been continuing to, inform groups and members of the community to complete the survey. So as of today, we have 156 completed surveys. We are going to keep that open through the end of this month. So again, if you have other groups, organizations that you can send the survey link to, it is on our city website. So we really want to try to get one more big push for survey respondents to that. And just lastly, we're working with Washington County, some resources we have on focus groups. So that will be our next series of community input coming up in August, hitting different markets of individuals so we can gather more specific information based on demographics and age range and all of that. So we are working on that. The grant itself, the grant work needs to be completed by the end of October. However, we can continue making updates as needed. We don't have to have our updates completed by the end of this year. As you know, tonight we talked a lot about the park dedication component and how all of that is new with case law and driven by the state right now. So a big part for our updates, we are going to have a section in there that will talk more about our, through our needs assessment, how are we compared to national standards, how much, Abby had referenced, we're short on acreage of parkland, we need more parkland. So we will update that information so we have hopefully a good justification for our requests of parkland, financial contributions for park dedication as we take these case by case. So it's really important to update our parks master plan with that information. So that is what we are working on.
So Jamie, in relation to that, at some point, can we have some communication as to what our role will be as part of that master planning? And then the focus groups advance notice of that so that if we want to attend, we can. I'm not looking for answers now, but just
Yep.
asking for those two things.
Yeah, so currently, the park inventory assessments, you know, if you haven't, going out to a few different parks, I do have some printouts here if you need any, you can grab them on the table. If you have any issues with the parks that you were assigned, or, you know, I'm happy to go out to a few as well. So currently helping with that needs assessment, be detailed, this will really help us identify kind of the sections in our current master plan with existing amenities and things that were on that list of what to do, so we can help cross some of that off and just get a new baseline of where we're at. We have had some changes throughout the last few years or since this was adopted, so, but I will provide more information as we move along.
Thank you.
Similarly, Belts Park Master Plan, so just, I know we didn't have our June meeting, but I did communicate via email that we were selected for the DNR grant in the amount of $300,000 for the Belts Park project, which I think is great news for the city and the commission. This is a federal grant, so it requires approval from the National Park Service before they can enter into an agreement with the city. So right now, the state is working with the DNR. The DNR is working with the National Park Service on that approval process, and it'll come to us as soon as those two parties have that ready for us to review. So the anticipated start date for the federal award will be October of 2020, and they hope to have a contract to us by the end of this year. So that's just part of the funding component, you know, to have those grant dollars come in to support the project. There is just that process that we have to go through. So just wanted to let you know that is where it's at on that end. And city staff right now, in preparation for that, we're working on pricing for construction documents that we'll need to implement the project. So we are still doing work internally as that portion is happening. So if there's any questions?
Just on that, it's been so long, would it be possible to get the final, I mean, there was some discussion on what we had suggested and what they were gonna do, and I'm kind of lost now to see if it was all 100% agreed with, I don't know if it's city or what we wanted and what's in the master plan. And then again, are we going to be able to, as this commission has asked, to prioritize the warming house situation, or where is that all sitting?
Sure, I can get you some more information on that, and then the last document we had talked about was the phase 1, phase 2. Phase 1, which is what we applied for the grant, was the improvements to the playground equipment and the warming house building and paved trails throughout the park for the access component. So that is the phase 1. Phase 2 is more of the athletic improvements, but I can get you that final documentation as well.
Well, it sounds like what I would have said was in the first part anyway, if that is the
Right.
first thing.
Phase 1 does include the warming house facility.
And on this topic, Betty was wondering if we could look forward to plans to finally put a stake in the ground for Belts, knowing when it will start and when we'll have some progress.
So hopefully the update with the grant, you know, we previously communicated, we applied for the grant March 31st, waited to hear, was awarded the grant. Now they're working through the contract component. That will be through the end of this year. So construction is likely 2023, planned construction. When we did capital planning and budgets, that was reflected in 2023. So 2023 construction is probably realistic from a funding, having the grant dollars and in the capital planning for phase 1.
I have one question, Jamie. So you were talking about, we're needing more parkland that we were just talking about. How are we gonna come up with the funds to fix our parks that need to be fixed? Because we want more land, but we need more money to, it seems like it's a
Sure.
triple down effect.
So the quick answer is part of our 10-year capital plan. So the city just submitted, we just went through 10-year capital planning. I did submit on behalf of the park system feedback we had received in the past where we want an annual park replacement project. So every year, some money to replace existing. So I know we've got Manor Park is an older park, for example, and Summerfield has got the, you know, I think that one's at 20 years of lifespan at this moment. So budgeting and putting that request in, at least in the capital plan. From there, it's outside of my control. Obviously, every year the city, staff look over the capital plan and the budget on an annual basis. That will get modified. So for 2023, for example, it was primarily the Belts Park project. 2024, maybe it was, I don't know which park, but a park replacement. So it's request to capital funding, and every year that's reviewed by city council, and we have park dedication revenue. Otherwise, we have to find another source of revenue to support these projects. And right now, the request is to council in the capital plan.
Thank you.
Going along with this comment, I did bring up a couple of months ago that if we could have a budget at least every other month or something, you wouldn't have to ask that question, because you know where our park development funds are, you'd know where our money is. And I think that's a problem that I come up with, because I don't exactly know what we're talking about when we say we want to do these things. I want to know exactly what's in the budget. And
In the park dedication fund
I think we have
balance?
quite a few dollars in that park dedication fund.
Right, I believe there's about somewhere between $750,000. So I can get the fund balance. That's not a I can get you, I can send that out via an email as well.
That'd be
Just you
great.
guys know that fund balance.
And we're thankfully going to have a lot more coming up soon. So I think that's good to know that when it builds, we know what it's built to.
And I think as we continue to move forward with all of the work that needs to be done, identifying additional revenue opportunities to support existing infrastructure and plan for future development for the park system is a priority. I don't think we can sustain on just relying on park dedication funds. And just a reminder too, last year the city did approve $50,000 of the general fund for parks and trails improvements, which went into the park dedication account, as well as this year $450,000. So definitely taking some steps in that direction, which I think is great to help support parks and trails. So just continuing that request and conversation. And I know part of the city's strategic planning, out of the 5 initiatives, one of them was improvements to parks and trails. So continuing to advocate for that. And I think that's the role of the commission. Just a really quick update, Bayview Park plantings. I know at our May meeting, there was a motion to have plants selected and planted by July 1st. I myself have been in communication with the resident and just have indicated with staff resources with the 4th of July and the hot summer that it's not the best time to plant. He understands that we are working on what the planting will be. And I've communicated, we're hoping for a fall timeline, and that has been, the resident is happy that we are pursuing this. I've been in communication with him. So city staff is continuing to work through that and communicate with the resident. So it is in process. Completing by July 1st was a difficult timeline to do that, so. that
this
the
is one
update.
that Betty has questions on, and I do as well. She just indicated that she does not see any barrier of any kind between the Bayview Park and the neighbor, which we've just discussed, but she would like to know when we can expect that to be done. And just noting that we keep forgetting to put our community members higher on our lists. So this is one that I think, I'm afraid if we don't keep it on our agenda, we will lose sight of it and it won't happen. So if we could just get an update next month.
I'm happy to keep it on there. It has stayed on my list to do, and I've been continuing to communicate with the resident, and he's, been appreciative of that. So right now, we've communicated fall planting, and that he also is going to provide some suggestions of what he might think would be good there. So I am waiting on that as well, of what he might recommend for that location. But I'm happy to keep it as a staff
I
update.
think we should.
Yep, that's not a problem. Just a quick update, Clear Lake Park, the equipment has arrived. It's just waiting on installation from the company. I don't have a date, but it should be fairly soon. But it did, we did get the shipment in the week of just the July 11th. So Public Works did remove the rock and climbing net that was there, so it's ready to go. As soon as the company can come over and get that installed, that will be complete as well. So as soon as I have that, a better window of time, it should be soon, but again, we have it, the equipment arrived, just needs to be installed.
Do we surplus the old stuff, or what do we do with it?
Right now, I believe it's just being stored until we work through. We were going to see if we could come up with a plan with all the master plan work that we're doing. Going through that process, kind of put that on pause until we figure out a more strategic plan for what we can do with that in the future. So I think through this planning process, we'll have a better understanding. So we should have that available to repurpose. So Castlewood Golf Course, I know there's some questions on the timeline and where we're at with this project. Currently, there's just been a delay in contracted services, and I'm not in the construction industry, but I'm hearing that that's kind of the case just in general in the construction industry right now. But I do have an update. We'll have plumbing installed next week with electrical following that. And concrete will be poured the first week in August. That will take about a month to 28 to 30 days to fully cure. And once that is done, the next step is just that interior build out. And that's where city staff is at, of figuring out what that interior build out specifications and all of that will be. But we are making progress with some of that work coming up in the future here. So at this time, that is what I have for updates on Castlewood.
And for Castlewood, will we get to see the plans for the interior build-out before it's finalized?
I can request of that. I don't, right now, I have not been provided with any interior plans, but I can, again, keep this as a staff update ongoing until we have that come forward.
And then Betty was wondering if there is a future timeline. You can tell she was a project manager at one time.
Yeah.
A timeline for completion, taking into consideration some of the delays that are in place. So
I don't have that today,
No, I'm just
but I
passing
can
along the
continue to work on that.
feedback.
And lastly, Arts in the Park Entertainment. It was requested by the commission to do a mid-season review of the entertainment we've had scheduled thus far. So yesterday was our 6th Arts in the Park concert of the year. So we are at halfway. Just in respect of time and everything, I will email you guys an opportunity to provide that feedback via email, whether it's just if you have any comments, your favorites, rating them, I will get you something, or you're welcome to email me. But we are at that halfway point, and I just want to be respectful of while it's fresh, think of your notes from who you've heard at the Arts in the Park so far. Be prepared to see that come forward so you can provide that feedback to myself. So it's been a hot one, but we have had
Beautiful.
0 rainouts so far. We had one last Tuesday get ended early at 7:30, but I'm glad that we were able to get a good hour in. So it's been hot, but I think it's been great so far.
Comment from one of the families that sits there every time, and she just said to me, she says, Karen, just look around. And I looked around, and she said, they're all smiling. Everybody here is happy. So she was thinking that the Arts in the Park is just a real shot in the arm for attitude and entertainment. I mean, I just thought it was lovely that she's just been sitting there and looking at how happy the people are that are there. And the vendors all seem very good. And I've just had such positive vibes from it this year. So that's great.
We've had a great turnout from the beginning, so I think it's been well received by the community and people coming in from other communities. I've received a lot of good feedback as well. So it seems like from people coming to attend the event and vendors, everyone seems to be enjoying. So we're halfway. So with that, I don't have any other updates. Are there any commissioner updates?
Any updates?
Pretty much answered most of mine that I would have had.
Me too. Looking for a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
I was gonna say I want